Hi folks, welcome to your latest planning outlook that's updated on Tuesday evening the 27th of October. It's a story of very wet conditions as we head through the rest of this week. The concerns then for flooding across anywhere really from Wales to Cumbria to southwest Scotland as a series of fronts comes in from the Atlantic with some prolonged heavy falls of rain, windy much of the time as well. Temperatures will be milder with that south-southwesterly flow, but all in all a poor period of weather. Just the indication as we turn further into the start of November that things may start to quieten down. Here's a chart that shows you rainfall total, and this is from one of the fairly coarse resolution computer models, which basically means that it won't pick out the fine detail of the topography across the Western Mountains. So the values shown here essentially are an underestimate of the rainfall totals that will be seen locally in the hills, but it paints a pretty bleak picture already that there's extensive likelihood of 50 to 75 mil across those Western Mountains, and even by the end of Friday it could well be that parts of West Wales and Cumbria could well see 100 to 150 mil over the southwestern facing hills and mountains. So concerns for flooding in those areas, concerns for flooding really across all of those southwestern regions up to southwest Scotland as well through this time. That wet story is likely to continue onwards into the weekend as well. Let's have a look through the charts, and we start off with Wednesday, and at this point we're in a fairly cool and showery air mass that comes in on a west by southwesterly. It's a windy day up to gale force, particularly around squally showers. Those will really come in one after another across many western hills, perhaps at their most frequent across western Scotland, but will pile in to England and Wales too through the course of Wednesday. Fewer showers the further east and northeast you go, just one or two coming through on the wind toward the far northeast of the Highlands. Temperatures then near freezing point on the highest tops of freezing level, say around 1200 metres, so those showers will have some snow across the Munros, maybe temporarily a little bit lower down than that, and some hail thrown in for good measure. Into Thursday, and a change in terms of the dynamics of the weather situation in that we lose the cool showery air mass and replace it with a very mild humid air mass coming in from the southwest, and it doesn't make it any better, it makes it much worse in that respect because it brings greater, more prolonged heavy falls of rain coming in on that southwesterly conveyor belt, a series of fronts due to roll in as well. So setting in for heavy torrential falls of rain at times across the west-facing hills in Snowdonia, Lake District and southwest Scotland. Relatively lower rainfall totals, again, the further north and east you go. Winds up to gale, even severe gale force, likely at their worst across Wales, at their lightest across the north of the Highlands. Temperatures, though, by this stage are quite a bit milder, but it doesn't really do a great deal for the story of the day. Now this chart for Friday, just a snapshot really at midday. It maybe doesn't tell the whole story, but what we can get from this is that there's a trailing front that's running through on a southwesterly conveyor belt across England and Wales, and that may be a continuing story from Thursday night into Friday, that heavy prolonged rainfall continues, with that scope then for flooding really developing across the Lake District and West Wales by this stage. Low pressure lies out toward the southwest, still feeding this general frontal zone through. Across Scotland, just depending on how far north or south that front exists, we might just be into a story of showers across the far northwest as cooler air is temporarily back in across the Highlands behind that cold front. So again, some snow and some hail maybe across the higher tops. The milder air then lies to the south of that front. Into the weekend, and although detail is uncertain, it looks as though we've got another frontal system just clearing through, a centre of low pressure sweeping eastwards. Again, some rain, some showers in the forecast. That relatively cooler air still may be around across Scotland, and maybe temporarily that cooler air just gets in behind the cold front across England and Wales as well. It could just be that if the bump of high pressure that's across Ireland just nudges in, that we might just get a lull in the conditions for a time. I wouldn't be too clever at this stage, though, in terms of the timing. So maybe just a glimmer of at least part of Saturday giving something more optimistic. But expect some wind, expect some showers, and maybe something a bit more organised than that, at least for part of the day. The next fronts, though, look, are ganging up over the Atlantic. Again, might not look exactly like that by the time we get to Sunday, but the message is fairly clear that there's further frontal systems and heavy rainfall due to be in the picture. So The threat of some further heavy falls of rain, if that comes on top of what will have been around on Thursday, Friday, then that flooding risk will be exacerbated once again. There's the threat of gales or storm force winds if the chart is as active as that. Either way, it still looks an unsettled picture then as we go through the second half of the weekend. Milder air again to the south, cooler air toward the north. So not much cause for optimism, it must be said, at this stage for the weekend. As we go onwards into the start of next week, I suspect that those fronts will eventually just drag themselves eastwards. We still keep low pressure, most likely, just to our northwest. So we're in that showery, fairly cool westerly air mass as we go into the start of next week. Those showers coming in still on brisk winds, some snow and some hail across the higher mountains, chiefly in Scotland. Just notice away to our southwest, though, a zone of higher pressure is starting to build, and it's likely that that builds a bit further as we go toward the middle of the week and begins to expand finally in across the British Isles, cutting off the jet stream flow and the constant bombardment of weather systems coming in from the Atlantic. Those begin to be steered a bit more towards Iceland as we go toward the middle of the week. Whether this timing is right, we'll wait and see. It's a good week or so away, but there's just the signal of a change of pattern as higher pressure begins to build. If we look at the forecast pressure anomalies in the longer range, that's through the week up until the 9th of November, and it's a more optimistic picture. This might be too optimistic, but it's the signal of something changing at least compared to the constant weather systems off the Atlantic. It's the signal for higher than average pressure, and that trying to settle itself in quite broadly across West and Northern Europe by this stage. So signals are there as we go into the early part of November for more settled, quieter weather becoming established. Before we get there, though, quite a lot of bad weather on the way, so be aware of that over the week ahead. Stay up to date, of course, with our forecasts every day on our website. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.